The illusion of the separate self is one of Alan Watts' most transformative ideas, a philosophy that invites us to question the very foundation of who we think we are. From childhood, we are taught to see ourselves as distinct individuals, living in a world that exists outside of us. Society, language, and culture reinforce this separation. We say, "I am here," and "that is there," as though there is a clear line dividing the observer from the observed. But Watts insisted that this division is not real, it is a useful mental construct, not a reflection of reality itself. He often described the sense of self as a social convention, something that arises from the words and symbols we use. Language gives us names and labels that make us feel separate from everything else, yet in truth, these words are only tools for communication, not mirrors of the ultimate nature of existence. The ego, the I, that we imagine, is nothing more than a collection of memories, habits, and patterns of thought. It is not an entity, but a story that consciousness tells itself. Watts believed that this illusion of separateness is the root of much human suffering. When we think of ourselves as isolated beings, we become fearful, defensive, and anxious. We strive to protect ourselves against the world, forgetting that the world is not other than us. This illusion creates the endless struggle for identity, security, and meaning. It fuels competition, greed, and alienation because we feel we must assert our existence against everything else. Yet, he taught that when we look deeply, through meditation, self-inquiry, or pure awareness, we find that there is no boundary between the self and the universe. The skin, which seems to divide us from the world, is actually a meeting point where inner and outer realities interact. The breath that enters and leaves us, the food that becomes our body, the light that allows us to see, all of it demonstrates that we are in constant exchange with the world. The division is conceptual, not actual. Watts compared this relationship to waves on the ocean. A wave rises, moves, and falls, but it is never separate from the ocean itself. The wave has a temporary form, but it is made entirely of water. Likewise, human beings have names, personalities, and forms, but at the deepest level, we are made of the same essence as the cosmos, energy, consciousness, and existence itself. This understanding leads to a profound sense of unity. When you realize that you are not a stranger in the universe, but the universe experiencing itself as you, fear and resistance dissolve. The anxiety of life, the terror of death, and the pain of loneliness all begin to fade. What remains is a feeling of flow, belonging, and harmony, the natural rhythm of being. Watts used humor and simplicity to express this truth. He said that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The self cannot grasp itself, because it is not a thing to be grasped. It is a process, a movement, a happening within the great dance of existence. When we stop chasing after an identity and allow ourselves to simply be, we discover that what we truly are has never been separate from the totality of life. This insight also transforms our understanding of death. If there is no separate self, then there is no one who is born and no one who dies in the ultimate sense. Birth and death are like waves rising and falling, changes in form, not losses of substance. Consciousness continues, not as your consciousness, but as the ongoing activity of the cosmos. Watts often criticized Western culture for its obsession with individualism. He observed that modern society glorifies the idea of self-made people, independent of everything around them. This creates the illusion of control, yet leaves people feeling profoundly disconnected. In contrast, he encouraged seeing life as an interdependent web, where every part affects and is affected by every other part. He also drew from Eastern traditions such as Zen and Taoism to illustrate this idea. In Zen, enlightenment is the realization that there is no I who attains enlightenment, there is only the unfolding of awareness itself. In Taoism, the Tao flows through all things. To resist it is to suffer, to move with it is to find peace. Both traditions emphasize the same insight that Watts brought to Western ears: the self and the world are one. To live by this truth is to let go of the constant struggle to control life. Instead of fighting the current, we float with it. Watts called this the art of letting go. When we stop trying to be something, to prove ourselves, to hold on to ideas, to define every experience, we begin to experience life directly, vividly, and without fear. The ego loosens, and what remains is presence. This presence is not passive. It is full of life and energy, but without the tension of self-centered effort. Action flows spontaneously, guided by the intelligence of the whole rather than the will of a separate individual. Watts likened this to music. You don't play a symphony to get to the end, you play it to enjoy every note. Life, too, is not a journey to a destination, but a melody to be experienced in the moment. When we live as if we are separate, we experience constant conflict between me and the world. But when the illusion dissolves, even ordinary experiences become sacred. The sound of the wind, the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of sunlight, all these reveal that the universe is alive and you are part of its living pulse. Watts' perspective does not deny individuality, rather, it redefines it. Each person is a unique expression of the whole, just as each leaf is a unique pattern of the tree. To realize this is not to lose yourself, but to discover your truest nature, the self that is not confined to one body or one lifetime. He also taught that this realization cannot be forced or achieved through effort. It happens when you stop trying to grasp it. The very act of seeking enlightenment reinforces the illusion that there is a separate you who must find something. The moment you let go, awareness opens, and you see that you were never apart from reality to begin with. This way of seeing changes how we relate to others. Compassion naturally arises when we know that others are not other. Helping someone else is no longer a moral duty, but a natural response of one part of life to another. Love becomes effortless, not as sentiment, but as recognition of unity. Watts saw humor in this cosmic play. He said life is like a hide-and-seek game that the universe plays with itself, hiding in the form of you and me, and then rediscovering itself through awakening. From this perspective, even the struggles and tragedies of life become part of the great dance, the game of being and becoming. He warned, however, that the intellect alone cannot grasp this truth. The illusion of the separate self is not destroyed by reasoning but by direct experience. Meditation, art, music, and deep contemplation can help dissolve the rigid boundaries of ego, allowing us to sense the living flow of the whole. This philosophy also bridges science and spirituality. Watts noted that in physics, matter and energy are seen as continuous, there are no absolute separations in nature. The boundaries we perceive are patterns of relationship, not barriers. The same is true in consciousness, there are distinctions, but no ultimate divisions. Recognizing this interconnectedness brings a sense of humility and reverence for life. We stop seeing nature as something to conquer or control, and instead, we understand ourselves as participants in its unfolding. The trees breathe out what we breathe in, the rain that falls becomes the blood in our veins. Everything is relationship. Watts' teaching also carries a practical wisdom for daily life. When you no longer feel separate, you stop taking things so personally. Challenges become part of the rhythm of life, not threats to your identity. Success and failure lose their sting because they no longer define who you are. You act, but without attachment to outcomes. In moments of deep awareness, this truth reveals itself without words. The boundaries soften, the mind quiets, and there is a simple, radiant presence, a feeling of being home everywhere. This is not something mystical or remote, it is the natural state of consciousness when freed from the illusion of separateness. Watts invited people to laugh at the seriousness of the ego. He said the whole problem of life is that we take ourselves too seriously. The moment we see the self as a playful illusion, life regains its joy. We can dance, love, and create without fear of losing ourselves, because there was never anything to lose. Ultimately, the illusion of the separate self is not a doctrine but an experience, a shift in perception from division to unity, from striving to flowing, from fear to freedom. It is the realization that life is not happening to you, it is happening as you. Watts' message remains timeless because it speaks to the deepest human need, to feel connected, whole, and at peace in a world that seems fragmented. His words continue to awaken countless people to the truth that we are not isolated minds trapped in bodies, but expressions of the infinite universe itself. When we awaken from the illusion of separateness, life becomes a continuous act of wonder. Every moment, every breath, Every heartbeat becomes a reminder that existence is not something we have, it is what we are. And in that realization, the search ends, and the dance begins again, endlessly, beautifully, as the universe celebrating itself through you.